All right, guys, we are here for day 2 pull with an extremely bare bones and basic back workout. I mean, this one takes me back to the early days when I didn't have access to any fancy equipment. And man, you almost forget how effective simple training can be once you start messing around with all the new bells and whistles that are available today. And I have to say that after this session, this really made me have another level of appreciation for this simple and hard training that I grew up on. A lot of these basic movements, they can be exercises that you might want to be a bit more careful with, especially as you get older and you rack up more wear and tear. But in my opinion, and this session was a good confirmation of the fact that when you rest, you rust. And I want to be doing this for as long as I'm alive. So I'm going to keep rowing, I'm going to keep hip hinging, and I'm never going to give my body a reason to regress. And with that being said, let's get to this bare bones pull session, where today we focused on some volume work for the lats and hit some basic progression work on the middle, lower, and upper back. Starting with the lat work today, my goal was to completely pre-exhaust the lats. I'm extremely bicep dominant, as you can see, and my lats are a body part that I want to bring up more of, especially from the front. And in my opinion, there's no better exercise to develop that area than pullovers. I'm doing these first because I want my lats to be doing the majority of the work on all the exercises that I do for them in this session. We're starting here with 2 sets of 15 to 20 repetitions. My goal with these are to get a deep stretch here and to really focus on the lats doing the work. With the dumbbell variation of the pullover, it's very easy to turn these into a movement where the chest and even the triceps heavily assist in. So that's why I'm not utilizing them as a progression exercise in this block, and I'm aiming to keep these reps perfect and pump as much blood into the muscle as possible and rack up some effective volume for the lats. This year I spent a lot of time doing lat specific training, including lots of single arm lat pull downs, rows, and I got super strong. I mean, I got stupid strong on some of these lifts. But my lats, while they have improved, they still really didn't reach the level of development that I was looking for, especially for how strong they had gotten this offseason. So with this phase, I'm going with a different approach. My goal here is to smash them hard first with some isolations, pre-exhaust them, and then focus on more direct lat work using slightly lighter loads. I find that for the lats, that if you're not genetically gifted in that department, you have to be extremely deliberate with not only your exercise technique, but more importantly, with your exercise order to get the most out of them. And while I think everyone's so wrapped up about how many sets you should be doing and what fancy exercises you should do to bring up a body part, the main thing people are missing is the fact that exercise sequence matters. A pull-up or a lat pull-down is going to cause a very different level of lat engagement when they're pre-exhausted or placed later in a workout versus done fresh. And we're about to see that here with some wide grip bodyweight pull-ups placed second in this workout. Now, I'm a pull-up guy. They've been a staple in my training for years. And at my strongest, I was doing an additional 90 pounds for 10 reps or so. But I'm going to be going with bodyweight pull-ups here for 2 reasons. 1, again, the lats are already pre-exhausted from pullovers. So I'm significantly weaker having done those first. And even with just my body weight here, 12 reps was fairly hard. And the second reason is because once the load starts getting heavy, it's very easy to turn this into a bicep and shoulder movement. I personally find that with anything for the lats, and you can test this out for yourself, I might do single arm machine rows with 5 plates for 12 reps. But on my warm-ups, when I'm doing 1 plate, 2 plate, 3 plate, even 4 plates, while that weight is very light, and I would need a lot more absolute load to fail in the target rep range, the lat engagement and the mind-muscle connection is much better on those lighter sets. Now, does that mean that you should just train light? No, because then you might need 30 or 40 reps to train near failure, which isn't going to get you nearly the same hypertrophy response as using a load that you might fail at 6 to maybe even 15 reps. But what about if you place that movement strategically in the session where the lats are already pre-fatigued from an isolation exercise, or you just place the lat exercise that you're weakest on early in the session and you place the lat exercise that you're very strong on later in the session? You're now going to be limited to how heavy you can go. And now that exercise that you might use 5 plates on for 15 reps, you might only need 2 or 3 plates to fail at that 15 rep range. And your absolute load on the lift is now lighter. So your technique could potentially be more favorable. Now you took those warm-up sets and you turned them into effective working sets. That's what I'm purposely doing here with the pull-ups. And I'm using an old school protocol that I got out of Arnold's book, and one that I used for years when I first started training. And that was simply doing 50 total reps in as many sets as it takes. Today, that took me 5 sets. I got 12, 12, 12, 10, and 10. So technically, that's 56 reps. I personally just wouldn't stop when I hit the 50 mark, as that would be just a waste of the last set. So I still went with an AMRAP. Based on the fact that I did these second in the session, and my body weight currently is close to 210 pounds, I'd say that's actually a pretty solid foundation to work with for week 1. This is an exercise that I'm going to aim to progress on weekly, but the key here is keeping the range of motion locked in. I'll always aim for my clavicle to hit the bar on the first reps and sets, but as they progress, I'm aiming to, at the very least, get my chin over the bar. Once I can't get my chin over the bar, that set is done. And by the time I finish up those 2 sets of pullovers and 5 sets of pull-ups, my lats were on fire here. Now keep in mind, the exercise order, the technique, and these subtle tweaks I'm making are for my own training and my own goals, especially at my advancement level. If you're in a position similar to me, give these a try and I think you'll be very happy with the results. But remember, if you're still a beginner or you're an intermediate, don't overcomplicate it. Just get super strong on the basics and you'll be ahead of 90% of people in the gym. I promise that. That's how I got to where I am now. And at this stage, I'm just making refinements to my training to eke out any extra progress that I can. Now, a lot of people are going to ask about the straps, and I know most people have the misconception that I'm using them because I'm not strong enough to do these lifts without them. The fact is, if you're trying to target your lats and you're not using straps, you're literally setting yourself up for less lat engagement. If you notice, I'm wrapping these straps around the bar, but then I'm performing a thumbless grip here. The thumbless grip actually causes a very weak position without the straps. But with the straps, it allows me to take the focus off pulling with my hands and focus on pulling with my elbows. My grip is actually extremely relaxed here, so I'm taking all the tension off my biceps. By pulling with the elbow, now I'm targeting the lats specifically. And that should always be the focus. We're not here training the grip. We're not here focusing on sounding hardcore because we don't need straps. It's not about that. It's about using a tool to get bigger. And straps are a non-negotiable if you want a bigger back. These rear double biceps showing just how dominant my shoulders and arms are in that pose, which we really need to focus on bringing up. The lat spread isn't looking too bad, but we want more thickness in that lower back. So what better exercise to do with that than a heavy hip hinge? Now that the lat work is done, we're going to focus on some progression on the rows and hip hinges with some barbell stiff leg deadlifts, which a lot of people tend to think of as a leg exercise or a hamstring specific exercise. And to be honest, any hip hinge can be altered to be more hamstring, glute, or lower back biased. Personally, I do either an RDL or a stiff leg deadlift the majority of the time as my primary back thickness hip hinge movement. Today, you'll see almost a hybrid approach of both. I'll start with the bar racked and I'll drive my hips back just like an RDL, but I'll go all the way to the floor for a dead stop. Basically, I'm making this a cross between a stiff leg deadlift and an RDL, but my goal here is to hammer the posterior chain. Again, I want to use the least amount of load with this exercise as well, as I need to get the job done. This is a movement that's been out of my rotation for a long time, and I've recently just gotten over some serious sciatica issues that was messing me up for months. So I'm being ultra careful with these here. Working up to just one heavy top set and then doing one lighter back off set for higher reps. I worked up to just 315 pounds for 5 reps here. Then I did a back off set with just 225 pounds for 12 reps. These weren't anywhere near failure. One, because this is the first week of the new program, and because they were out of rotation for such a long time, which will give me plenty of time to progress with these. And 2, because I want the technique on these to be crisp. I'm not built great for deadlifts or any hip hinges. My mobility isn't the best either, and this is a movement that you have to really assess the risk to reward ratio on. My lower back can use a lot more thickness, so can the glutes and hams. And while the hip hinge movements can be more of a higher risk exercise, in my case, the reward and the return on investment is huge here. So I'll keep these in as my stable progression exercise here. I just have to keep the technique as a priority, even above the absolute load. As if I'm injured or if I'm even in pain, I can't train. And not training isn't building any muscle. Last exercise for the day is one that I've really been enjoying lately, and that's a simple one-arm dumbbell row, but with a slight twist. For years, I did the basic one-arm dumbbell row done traditionally with one knee on the bench, and it was a staple in my training. But over time, they just became less and less comfortable for my lower back. And I've actually found that by removing my leg from the bench and leaning on a rack or a barbell like in this case, it allows me to do these a bit more comfortably. The goal of the movement here is to really hammer the upper back and the lower traps and not turn this into a lat exercise. So instead of the neutral grip and pulling that elbow and dumbbell to the hip, I'm staying a bit more bent over here and over the weight, and I'm using a hands over grip, just like a barbell row, and I'm pulling that to my upper chest. This is a pure upper back lower trap row now. 2 sets done here, as heavy as possible for 10 to 12 reps, and that'll be a progression movement for today. I haven't done these recently with anything above 120 pounds, but I wanted to try some lower rep ranges, so I grabbed the 140s, got 2 sets of 10, and they felt great. Lower traps and upper traps were cooked after this, and that capped off my basic heavy and hard back training session. Tomorrow is a rest day, which after these 2 training sessions is much needed. If you guys need a training program to build muscle using my old school bodybuilding training methods, make sure to check out all my programs below. And as always, if you want to follow along, make sure to hit subscribe.